Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Hey, it's so good to have you on Life Support. What we do on this program is we tell stories about how Jesus changes lives, and we love talking to those who are involved with that process. So I'm glad you're here. I pray that you'll be encouraged today. And we have a very special guest, Chaplain Janet Rodriguez-Ricci. She's the chaplain at the Shakopee Women's State Prison. And Janet, thanks so much for dropping by. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me and just for making space for tough conversations.
Well, you know what? That's what we try to do. And we're excited to see how God works in those tough situations. And that's really where he shines many times. So tell me how you ended up being a chaplain at Shakopee Women's State Prison.
It's a long and winding road for sure. I will say that noticeably as a child, I had a real insatiable desire for justice. And my parents were aware of that. And so I really just encourage parents everywhere to be in tune to what you're seeing in your children at young ages. My parents certainly were. They were also protective of that. But that, I believe, is sort of where that started. I don't think calling happened overnight. I think it was evolving throughout my life. When I did finally get to seminary, chaplaincy was not on my radar screen at all. I was studying to become a pastor, full pastoral ministry. It was offered as an opportunity to do an internship using CPE, so clinical pastoral education. And when I entered that process initially at Hennepin County Medical Center, that is where I felt like a light switch was flipped. And I knew this was it for me.
Yeah, you didn't choose the easiest road.
No, it was not easy. But
because you're making big bucks and everything, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think everything was a process. So when I entered CPE in a hospital setting, it became apparent to the people who were over me that a lot of people with addiction and trauma were opening up to me in ways that weren't necessarily happening for everybody else. And that really is a big part of that clinical process, is seeing, hey, where are your places that you uniquely fit into that maybe not every chaplain is going to be as effective in.
There are so many different types of chaplaincy.
A lot.
All of them with their own challenges. I very much admire those who dive into the things you're doing, whether it be workplace chaplaincy or hospice chaplaincy, whatever.
Right.
When you drive by a prison and you've never been inside of one,
yes.
Which people out here in the West Metro do quite often. Some roads do lead through Shakopee, and we see the place, and we go, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. That must be like Shawshank. Like, where's Morgan Freeman?
Right.
What is it like? What is it like to walk into the state prison there, and what kind of people do you encounter?
So initially when you walk in, I always say aesthetically, I feel like our facility sort of looks like an elementary school. Any elementary school you've ever been in, right down to those brick walls and the flat carpet. And that's exactly what it looks like. It's not that big, and it's always teeming with incarcerated people who are on the move. And I think that's a little known feature, is that incarcerated people have a lot to do during the day, so they are moving about and getting to where they need to be next.
Mm-hmm. And then you have obviously developed personal relationships with each one to the best of your ability. Tell me what a normal day looks like for you when you visit there.
So when I come in, I usually I see my ministry of presence as the second I am walking in. And so as soon as I'm getting through the Sally Port, I'm already checking in with whoever's in master control and just seeing how they're doing. How's the day been going? How was the night? I'm just trying to gather information even as I'm walking in. And certainly being present and noticing all of our officers is highly important to me. So I'm greeting people as I'm coming in, checking on them, finding out what do I need to know so that I don't make things worse today, but I make things better from a facility standpoint.
Right.
Once I am checking into my office, it's really, I usually have a lot of referrals that have already come in from officers out on units who are aware of situations where they're saying, can you please check in with this person? They had a death last night, or this person has somebody on life support, and those types of things.
And you also pay attention to the guards, and that's
100%.
a big deal. That's not an easy job they have either.
It's not an easy job, and I think being able to be a presence where they can constantly be coming, if they so choose, they can come and talk about the things that are triggering them. Because as humans in an environment that's pretty dynamic, where you're working with a very traumatized population, your own trauma can get triggered.
Yeah. I remember visiting someone in a men's prison. It was a maximum security, and talking to one of the guards on the way out, and he just said, like, every day this is like fear. Fear reigns here for everyone. And that's got to be a very difficult thing to deal with, to go home and not try to drag that home with you and then come back and do the same thing the next day.
Right, exactly. Self-care is at the top of the list. And I need to be on top of mine in order to be able to impart that and encourage that into the rest of the staff.
My guest is Chaplain Janet Rodriguez-Ricci. She's the chaplain at Shakopee Women's State Prison. All right, so churches want to help. People want to help.
Yes.
But they don't necessarily know how or what the best way to help is. So what kinds of things do you long for kind of the Christian population to do to help the things you're trying to accomplish?
I think there's practical things, and then there's like theological things that I guess I would speak to. On the practical level, we can't really receive a lot of items into our facilities. So we have people who want to send in gifts. We can't receive those. We can't pass gifts out to incarcerated people. Certainly there are certain things that you can do, like purchase, cases of Bibles and arrange with me to have those shipped in, things like that, that can happen. But we really, really, really need our churches and our Christian community on the outside to be trying to work with and for this population before they ever get inside. And so it is not easy work. I think the easier work almost is what happens inside, whereas outside it takes a lot of rolling up the sleeves. It might take money. It takes a lot of work. But we need people to create programs, to create reentry programs, outreach programs, support programs, things that people can be engaging now. And maybe to even be a little bit creative in that. If you are First Church Minnesota and you have a lot of resources, can you step into people who are maybe located more on the front lines where a lot of activity is happening, and maybe they would be a great opportunity to create some recovery groups or walk-in, check-in groups. Could you support that? Could you come around that financially? Could you support it without making it have to be your own?
Yeah.
And let it be. Can churches start working together?
Well, that would be a new concept. I think a lot of times it's very easy for churches to think that they've developed the wheel, invented the wheel, and then to shove some kind of a program, I'm sure, at you at times, rather than just saying, hey, what do you need?
Yeah.
Right? And that would be a good first question.
Yes.
What do you need?
What do you need?
Yeah.
What do you need?
Because the people you're working with are yes, they're traumatized. Yes, they've done something wrong, but they're image bearers of God. They're just as important as anybody else.
100%.
God loves them. And I think one thing I'm going to ask you about is there's a perception, I think, that once someone goes to jail, if you want to put it that way, their lives are pretty much over. But that's not really true, is it? I mean, there are many people who rebuild their lives after, and there's hope for everyone. Is there not?
Absolutely. I tell the women who are coming in on orientation, I say, do not waste an incarceration. Don't waste it, because there's a lot of opportunity here for you to create life change, to allow transformational moments to come into your life, but you have to be willing to engage those. So don't just come here and coast. Don't just do time. Do good time. Mm-hmm. It's available to you.
Do you find that there are other incarcerated individuals that are like mentors for some of those that come in for the first time, and kind of natural people that step in and help them?
Certainly, 100%. And I should say, I always really try to hone in on whoever has life sentences, because this is their forever home here on earth, as best we know. Mm-hmm. And what kind of community do they want? Because you are the people who really kind of tend this community. So what is the community that you want, and how can we create that together? Right.
That's an interesting point. You're really helping them establish and help planning what their lives are going to look like. And so they have a huge investment in that.
They have a huge investment, and I would say they have a huge purpose. Mm-hmm. This may not be what they wanted today, but it is where you are. And if you are willing to let God use you here, you can have a huge impact outside of here, right? Because so many of the people are coming and releasing and coming and releasing. So if you see this as prison ministry and you are impacting the lives that are coming in, when they go out, they might leave differently.
How long does it take someone normally to adjust to... I mean, when I think of having a life sentence, I get claustrophobic really quickly. Yeah. Like, it just feels, oh no, like the walls are closing in on me. Yeah. How long does it take normally for someone to kind of adjust to the fact that this is going to be their home?
Right.
And they're probably not going to go anywhere. Is that a lengthy process for them to get to that point?
It is a long process. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when we listen and I talk with those people, I will hear about how, the first 10 years I fought and I stormed and that's what I did. I just fought. That was my reaction, was to fight. Not all, but for some, that's the case. And then they kind of start to dial back in and start to get into some healing and some purpose driven in their own lives while they're there. And that's when you start to see a very different response.
What kind of reaction do you get when you begin to introduce spiritual things to these women who you're getting to know for the first time?
Usually people are very receptive to all things spiritual. They're very, very engaged. We have a huge amount of religious services that we offer at Shakopee, and they are usually pretty well maxed out in attendance. People want to engage their spirituality while they're there, and I think the trick is, how can I help you to make this your lifelong? Mm-hmm. How can I help you make this lifelong, so that when you leave, because most 95% will leave, so that when you leave, this isn't just something you did here.
Yeah.
But that it becomes your way of life.
Yeah, because it has to be very, we'll talk about reentry in our next segment too, but it has to be very difficult not to just seek what you know. Once you get out and you've had kind of this great experience, it's kind of like going to camp.
Yes.
Right? You get on a mountaintop.
Yes.
And then you go home, you're kind of back to reality, and pretty soon you're still mad at the same people, and you have the same friends and all that. That's got to be very difficult to try to work through.
It is. And I think one of the things that people don't realize about a prison environment is that there is something very, very soothing about, like, the routine. Mm-hmm. And the meals are provided and your room is provided, and there are certain things, basic life things that are provided, and then you're just sort of moving throughout the day, going to work or to school or to treatment or to appointments, lots of appointments. So you're just going through all of those motions, and you don't choose your clothing because your clothing is picked for you. So much of the trappings and the distractions that are available on the outside are removed. And I think we minimize how important that is. That helps ripen the spiritual environment inside.
That's interesting. So they're moving kind of through their day. The routine is set. They're really the cares of kind of like shrink into more of I'm caring about now. I'm caring about today. I'm caring about this next appointment, rather than I have to think about what am I going to do with my finances and all that kind of thing that we always worry about.
Yes.
But I'm guessing too that the loneliness of it drives them towards spiritual things too, right?
It definitely does. And I think there's an interesting reality, and it happens to all of us at times maybe, is that we can be in a crowd and still feel lonely, because until we are touching that place of being known, we can remain unknown. Even in a crowd. And I think that's true. Most of our prisons are pretty full, and so therefore kind of crowded, and you're kind of around bustling people all the time. But how do you get known?
Yeah, that's got to be something that you really pay attention to.
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing that you're looking out for those people that are kind of hiding or introverted or not fitting in, or and that's, I'm assuming, where you can just be of huge help to someone.
For sure. And prison is interesting because you're already talking about a marginalized people group. But within that people group, there are people on the margins.
Yeah.
Even within.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So tell me about think about maybe one person that you've seen God do an amazing work in her life. I'm sure you see many, many of them, but maybe one pops to mind that you can share with us just to give us an idea of what God's doing in your midst there in Shakopee.
So I've worked with the men too, and so the first one that came to my mind actually was a man. He was in his upper 30s, and he had entered the streets at a very young age. In Chicago, young age, maybe 10, very young. And as we sat and we talked about that, the more he got into his story and was describing the lifestyle of his mother, who had been embedded in prostitution and drug use, and what he was witnessing as a child, that there was this aha moment for him where he realized that the reason why he was out there wasn't because he was truly a bad person inside of his heart, but that he was trying to save his mother. And so when we could kind of look at the narrative a little bit deeper together and say, like, you are internally, you are a man of honor. You're a man of integrity. And maybe you didn't have the skills or the know-how to go about that any differently, but that was at the heart of you. And that was very transformational for him.
Yeah, I bet it was, because I bet no one had ever said that to him.
No, I don't think it was recognizable even to himself.
Yeah.
And I think, and I remember him saying, it's not that I don't want to change my life. I truly do, but I don't even know where to begin. And I always will point people back to start to the very truth that you know. And so if you can start there with starting to name yourself as a man of honor and integrity, and that's who you are, and start walking that out even here. Yeah.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're saying this is who you really are, walk in it, and then he has to come and believe that.
Yeah.
And change the way he does things. Do you find that people see people who are incarcerated as being kind of generally speaking, if they really wanted to change, they could, from the people on the outside? Or, I know that we have that kind of attitude. You drive by somebody who's begging or something, and the first reaction is, well, if they really wanted to not be here, blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Yeah, I think that happens. And I also think a real phenomena that happens inside of Shakopee is that people will come in and maybe spend some time with our women and think that there are no problems.
Oh.
Like, this is just a room full of really nice people. And, you can't always point everything out, but it's like, okay, that's because that's nice that you came in and have seen that part, but there's also, a lot going on in the room that you're not seeing, that, that we're more tuned into and more aware of. So we do have people who do need strong mentorship and need to, those skills to learn how to change.
Yeah, I really admire what you do. I fear, that if I tried to walk into that environment, I would do a lot of damage because I would have no idea how to interact with those things.
Yeah.
And I would do pretty well at glad handing and hey, you're great and everything. But when it came down to, okay, here are my problems, I don't think I'd have any idea what to do or what to say.
Yeah.
What kind of training did you get to be able to do this?
Well, I've completed a Bachelor of Science, and then I went on and did my Master's of Divinity. So I completed that, a full Master's of Divinity.
Good for you.
And then also a full clinical pastoral education. So you have to do 4 units of CPE. So that includes a residency also.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah,
it's more than I think people realize.
Yeah, when I think of my Master's of Divinity, those 94 credits just like keep bouncing around in my head like I'm still reliving all of that. I always tell people, go get your doctorate. It's way easier than getting through that Master of Divinity.
Yes.
So if somebody's listening right now and they do want to help, they want to pray, they want to, do something to aid these people or aid you, how can they get in touch with you or someone and really learn about the process?
Sure. So you can certainly always reach out to me through email or through phone. You can call the facility and ask to be connected to me. That's fine. I'm always happy to help people understand that process. Yeah.
And so you're not afraid to take a few calls or answer a few emails?
Not at all afraid to do that. Would welcome those anytime. And I think internally, because as a student, right? I'm a lifelong student of clinical pastoral education. So we follow this model of action and reflection and always reflecting. And so even as you're considering actions that you want to take, what is your reflection, your internal reflection? Mm-hmm. And I just invite you right now, to always be in that process. What is drawing you to this population, and to ask even some of those bigger and scarier questions that I often ask myself as well as incarcerated people. And it's, what do you actually believe about God? What do you actually believe about what you say you believe? Because we're very good at saying a lot of things.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus came to set the captives free. I mean, amen.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what do you really actually believe about what you're saying right now?
About others and about yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you call, ask for Chaplain Janet Rodriguez-Ricci, Shakopee Women's Prison, call it prison, state prison.
Yep.
I'm so glad you were here. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. And I'm really glad you dropped by.
Thank you.